Seeds of Wisdom RV and Economic Updates Thursday afternoon, the 7th of August 25. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com blog and become our supporter on Patreon. Good afternoon. Dinar recaps. Bank of England expected to cut interest rate to 4.0% despite rising inflation. BoE expected to cut rates from 4.25% to 4.0%. UK inflation accelerates while growth continues to contract. GBP, USD at risk of falling toward August lows near 1.3140. The Bank of England, BoE, is poised to announce a 25 basis point interest rate cut on Thursday, reducing the benchmark rate from 4.25% to 4.0%, according to growing market consensus. Analysts expect that 7 out of 9 Monetary Policy Committee (MPC) members will vote in favor of the cut, up from just 3 in the previous meeting. The decision will be accompanied by the meeting minutes and the Monetary Policy Report, offering insight into the BoE's updated economic outlook and inflation projections. Following the announcement, Governor Andrew Bailey is scheduled to deliver a press conference outlining the rationale behind the rate cut and potentially signaling the bank's future policy trajectory. Economic backdrop. A conflicting picture. The BoE last held rates steady in June. At that time, 3 MPC members cited weakened labor market conditions, subdued consumer demand, wage growth trending toward sustainable levels. Since then, economic indicators have continued to show strain. UK GDP contracted 0.1% MOM in May, following a 0.3% contraction in April. Production output fell 0.9%. Construction output declined 0.6%. Services output rose slightly by 0.1%. These figures paint a troubling picture of a slowing UK economy, just ahead of the Q2 GDP estimate set for release on August 14. Inflation rebounds, complicating the BoE's dilemma. Despite declining growth, inflation rose sharply in June. Headline CPI climbed to 3.6% YoY, up from 3.4% in May. Core CPI increased to 3.7% YoY, from 3.5%. Services inflation held steady at 4.7%, with food prices showing their biggest jump since February 2024. Meanwhile, labor market conditions continue to loosen, with the unemployment rate climbing to 4.7% in April, from 4.4% at the start of the year. As the central bank weighs slowing growth against persistent inflationary pressures, Governor Bailey recently reiterated revised economic forecasts expected. Analysts anticipate that the BoE may upgrade inflation projections due to sticky services inflation and rising food prices, downgrade growth expectations, reflecting weak consumer demand and broad-based output declines. Market reaction. GBP, USD faces downside risk. Ahead of the announcement, GBP, USD is trading just above 1.3300, struggling to extend gains. The central bank's split vote and cautious tone are expected to exert downward pressure on the British pound. According to Valeria Bednarek, chief analyst at FX Street, the GBP/USD pair hovers around its weekly peak in the 1.3330 region, without any technical sign of additional gains ahead. She continues, the pair could turn bullish only if it breaks above 1.3400, an unlikely scenario given the expected BoE announcement. On the downside, watch the 1.3250 support. If breached, GBP/USD could target the August low at 1.3141. Conclusion. The Bank of England faces a complex policy crossroads. Inflation is rising, but growth is faltering. While a rate cut appears imminent, the communication strategy and vote split may be the biggest market movers. The fate of the GBP/USD pair hangs in the balance, with downside risks mounting unless the BoE delivers a surprisingly hawkish outlook. Canada and Mexico to join BRICS? The fall of the US dollar in 2024? Exploring BRICS expansion in the Western Hemisphere. Mexico formally declines BRICS membership. Canada remains silent on BRICS engagement. Is the US dollar's global dominance at risk? Potential expansion of BRICS, an analysis of Canada and Mexico's involvement. The BRICS bloc, originally composed of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has been rapidly expanding. In August 2023, the alliance extended invitations to several countries, 5 of which officially joined in 2024. This growth has sparked speculation about whether Western-aligned nations, including Canada and Mexico, could eventually pivot toward BRICS, potentially accelerating de-dollarization efforts worldwide. Mexico's stance on joining BRICS. Speculation surrounding Mexico's potential entry into BRICS intensified in mid-2023, ahead of the bloc's August summit. However, Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador publicly refuted such claims, affirming that Mexico would not seek membership in the alliance. The decision aligned with Mexico's long-standing trade, economic, and geopolitical ties with the United States under frameworks such as USMCA. Canada's position regarding BRICS. In contrast to Mexico, Canada has made no official statements regarding BRICS membership. To date, there have been no public discussions, diplomatic engagements, or policy shifts that indicate Canadian interest in aligning with the BRICS bloc. Canada remains a core member of Western institutions such as the G7, NATO, and the OECD, further reinforcing its alignment with the existing US-led financial order. Will Canada and Mexico join BRICS? Based on current geopolitical alignments, it appears highly unlikely that either Canada or Mexico would pursue BRICS membership in the near term, particularly with the explicit goal of weakening or replacing the US dollar. While 2023 saw increasing concerns over the dollar's global dominance, including inflationary pressures and internal US political division, both Canada and Mexico remain deeply integrated into the US-centric financial and security architecture. BRICS aspirations and Western countries' responses. BRICS continues to push for greater economic sovereignty and a shift away from dollar dependency, aiming to promote settlement in local currencies and eventually introduce a shared digital or commodities-backed currency. These efforts have been well received in parts of the Global South and among energy-exporting nations seeking alternatives to SWIFT and IMF dollarization structures. Yet, the idea that NATO-aligned nations such as Canada and Mexico would join this movement remains speculative at best. Their participation in the US-led global order, access to Western capital markets, and dependence on the North American economic ecosystem make BRICS membership both politically improbable and economically costly. Conclusion. Realignment or rhetoric. Despite BRICS expansion and continued calls for monetary multipolarity, neither Canada nor Mexico are expected to deviate from their current trajectories. While the US dollar faces challenges, its foundational role in global trade, reserves, and institutional finance still ensures that Western partners remain tethered, for now. As BRICS gains more influence in the Global South, 2024 will be a year to watch, but expectations of Western defection to the bloc remain premature. BRICS to discuss joint response to Trump's tariffs. Lula calls out Trump's unilateralism and threat to multilateral trade. BRICS members may coordinate action in response to rising tariffs. Brazil, India, and China seek a unified strategy to limit US economic pressure. Lula urges BRICS coordination amid rising US tariffs. The BRICS bloc, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, is preparing to discuss a coordinated response to US President Donald Trump's escalating tariff threats. The initiative comes directly from Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, who criticized Trump's approach to international trade as a deliberate attempt to undermine multilateral institutions. What President Trump is doing is tacit. He wants to dismantle multilateralism, where agreements are made collectively within institutions, and replace it with unilateralism, where he negotiates one-on-one with other countries, Lula told Reuters. President Lula stated that he would initiate conversations with fellow BRICS leaders, beginning with Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday, followed by China's President Xi Jinping and others. His goal? To understand how each nation is affected by the US measures and to formulate a joint response. I'm going to try to discuss with them about how each one is doing in this situation. what the implications are for each country, so we can make a decision. Where BRICS tariffs currently stand. US-Brazil tariffs, currently at 50%. India tariffs, increased today by 25%, now totaling 50%. China-US tariffs, paused for now. Russia tariffs, above 30%. Canada tariffs, recently raised to 35%. EU goods, settled at a new 15% tariff. Trump has recently labeled the BRICS alliance as anti-American, issuing public threats to impose an additional 10% blanket tariff on bloc members. Some individual BRICS nations, notably India and China, have explored bilateral deals with the US to mitigate tariff effects. However, growing pressure may force a unified BRICS front to resist escalating US protectionism. Brazil's leadership role in BRICS response. President Lula emphasized that Brazil currently holds the BRICS presidency, granting it a leading role in shaping the bloc's diplomatic and economic posture. In his interview, he expressed concern not just over tariffs, but over Trump's broader agenda to dismantle multilateral norms. I want to discuss with our allies why Trump is attacking multilateralism and what his goals may be. Notably, Lula did not reference any intention to engage Trump directly as part of this initiative, suggesting that the response will remain within the BRICS framework for now. The bigger picture. Trump's tariff offensive. In recent days, President Trump has accelerated a wave of protectionist trade measures as part of his self-imposed tariff deadline. These include 35% tariffs on Canadian imports, 50% tariffs on Brazilian goods, 15% settled tariffs on EU exports. All of this appears to be part of a broader realignment of US trade policy aimed at strengthening leverage ahead of key diplomatic deadlines. Conclusion. BRICS eyes a coordinated strategy. The growing web of tariffs has created significant uncertainty for global markets and placed BRICS nations on alert. As Lula takes steps to convene the bloc's leadership, the prospect of a cohesive BRICS economic strategy, and possibly retaliatory action, marks a pivotal moment in the evolving US-BRICS relationship. Listen to the full version on the official dinarreport.com blog and become our supporter on Patreon. Source: dinarrecaps.com